So we're just gonna give it a couple seconds. I'm gonna double check, just to make sure we're live because there's been a couple times where we like prematurely started and it cuts the intro. So
Yeah.
definitely want to avoid that. So you know how technology is. So all right,
Hmm.
yeah. So we're officially live. So three, two, one. Welcome to Joshua's Jungle, where we discuss everything outdoors, wildlife, and adventure. I'm your host, Josh. This is Callie.
Hi. Last week, Josh and I had the privilege of seeing Ian McGrew's film about Hickory Hill and Queen of the Catskill, produced by Jamie Kennard, who we have here today with us. I wanted to start off by saying congratulations about Best Short Film Award in France.
Thank
That was
you.
awesome to see.
Yeah.
And then just to lightly get into things, we wanted to ask what made you fall in love with the Catskills and start your journey here.
Oh boy, that is coming up on a sort of a 20-year anniversary for me. Um,
Oh,
about a little over 20 years ago, came up here with friends who invited us. They had rented a house last minute, and we came up here and spent the weekend. My wife and I were living in the city at the time, and when we were driving back to the city, we just started thinking about this idea of moving to the Catskills or getting a place there. And we didn't know a single person up here, but the idea stuck with us so much that we literally drove back up the next weekend and started poking around at little farmhouses and a place that we could, call our own on the weekends. And from there, we spent 10 years driving up from New York City to the Catskills religiously every weekend of
Oh
the
wow.
year until we moved up here permanently in 2015. So, been a resident up here for 10 years. But there was something about the Catskills that just, sitting in New York City at a desk, and all I could think about was wanting to be in the mountains. And that just gnawed away at me, Monday through Friday. And I just needed to figure out a way to spend time up here on a Saturday and a Sunday. And after 10 years of that, just figure out a way to like move up here permanently and just immerse myself in the Catskill Mountains.
So during that time when you're traveling from New York City to the Catskill Mountains, were you mostly hiking? Was it mostly skiing? Like, what were you doing during that time period?
Yeah, during that time period, so I was a skier, but more in the traditional sense. I grew up alpine skiing. I was a junior ski racer, and I raced through college for Skidmore College up in Saratoga Springs. So ski racing was in my blood. I love to do it. But at the time when I first moved up to the Catskills, I was exploring the mountains here through hiking. So just on trails around my house or trails, some of the high peaks around here. And skiing at the resorts, but the sort of backcountry skiing side of my sort of current life wasn't really on my radar when I first started spending time here in the mountains. I was really getting to know the mountains just through hiking the high peaks.
What is your favorite Catskill hike or Catskill high peak? Just hiking wise.
Oh man. I think I'm a sucker for anything with a view. I appreciate the journey, the getting there and the getting back, but something like the classic viewpoints like Giant Sledge, which is on the way to Panther, or up on Twin, anything with a viewpoint or a good fire tower. I think, I like a good payoff. It's either a great payoff or something that's really going to take me off the beaten track. I'm a fly fisherman, but what I really love about fly fishing personally is fishing really tiny brook trout streams, so streams that work their way up into the mountains, and just following that stream, getting off the beaten path, and sort of working your way up the elevation, and you're sort of hiking and fishing. So it's not really hiking, a full on hike per se, but just sort of following that stream and letting it take you where it's going to go, and sort of getting lost. So, those are my two sort of opposite ends. One's just the classic payoff, and one is really just getting lost on the beaten path, and where you're not going to see another person for the entire day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you do a lot of wildlife photography, I noticed
Mhm.
through your Instagram. Is that kind of like one of your first loves, like of hiking, or like how did that kind of come about as well?
Yeah. Not a first love. The wildlife photography that I do is something that's come around in the last few years. My hiking, I guess, I'm not going to call it a career, but for the purpose of this, I will. My hiking sort of spans the last 20 years. Backcountry skiing in my life is maybe the last like 15 or so years. And the photography that I do now is about the last 4 or so years.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I didn't even know anything about photography. I never owned a camera. But in the beginning of 2022, I purchased a camera with the idea that I wanted to try to start making documentary films. But I knew nothing about filmmaking and I knew nothing about photography, even though I have a lot of friends and former clients that are photographers or filmmakers. So I've been around those people, but like technically, like what you need to do was something that I didn't know anything about. And so when I purchased the camera, it's a hybrid camera, so it's a camera that shoots video
Right.
and still images. And just to get to, I needed to figure out how to use the camera, and so I live on about 10 acres of wooded property, and I would just take the camera outside every day, and I have lots of birds around and other animals. And I would sort of use the wildlife as my muse to just practice getting used to the camera, just to like understand, what it does, where the buttons are, how to like react quickly and take a photograph. And I would just go outside and practice on the birds and the wildlife every day, just to get better with, just the technical aspects of using the camera. And, I've already had a love for being outdoors and wildlife and nature. But when I really started noticing it through the camera, it just unlocked something else. And I didn't know that I would soon become a birder and get obsessed with birds and go out and start chasing them and learning about them. But it all sort of came through me just needing to figure out how to use a camera and just needing a subject to go and practice on. And, birds are sort of technically challenging because they move pretty quickly and they're in and out of focus and they're behind branches. And so it just, there was sort of a challenge inherently just in choosing to photograph them as well. And I sort of really gravitated towards like the technical challenge, but also started really focusing on or learning about the birds and realizing how much wildlife was around me and how many different bird species, and just started to naturally go down that rabbit hole.
Yep. For only 4 years, your work is very terrific. Like, I would never honestly know that unless I, heard about it. Because seeing some of
Thanks.
the pictures, and
Yeah.
like, that is the coolest thing ever. And even just the way your films are. I know a lot of it's like different footage too, like maybe GoPros and all sorts of different things,
Mhm.
whatever you have on you. But
Yeah.
it's definitely really cool to see and inspiring, honestly.
Thanks. Yeah, I sort of lean into I aspire to sort of know what I'm doing and to understand the technical aspects, but I also don't get too hung up on the fact that I don't know how to do everything with either photography or filmmaking. And I sort of, I don't know, that sort of ethos or that mindset, I think, informs a lot of things that I do. Like I feel like I'm okay at a lot of things, but I'm not great at them. And I'm okay with not understanding, everything that a master photographer or filmmaker might know. I know enough to sort of get by, and if my work has some deficiencies, that's okay because I'm pretty new to this, but I'm learning every day.
Yeah, and it seems like very passionate about it, so that always helps too, because it's
Yeah,
something you love to do, clearly.
yeah, Yeah.
Is there like a golden egg or like a specific animal you're kind of chasing, or like for like through photography that you want to capture, or like anything like that?
It's funny how, yeah, that you put it that way. I mean, the more that I learn about birds, there are sort of rare birds that come into the area once in a while. And so those are certainly on my list. But I think, what I really love, I love owls. And there are some owls that I haven't seen that are present here in the Catskills. And then there are some more common owls like a barred owl, which I see quite often but still love photographing. There's some other wildlife like bobcats or fisher cats or ermine or even coyotes, which I see occasionally. But where I live, just because the forest is it's much more dense. I'm not, certain parts of the Hudson Valley have a lot more farmland and open areas where you could see some of those from far away. Whereas where I live, things are so dense that those animals can really blend in pretty quickly. So as a photographer or a filmmaker, sort of aspiring to capture some of those things, they have proven somewhat elusive. Bobcats, I've spent 20 years here in the Catskills, and I've seen in person a bobcat 3 or 4 times over my 20 years. And I either was not a photographer during some of those, or one time I was driving my car. I always drive, I have my camera in my car. My camera is on the passenger seat if no one is there. And the one day that a bobcat ran in front of my car, I had left my camera in the back of my car. And there was just no way that by the time I would have stopped and pulled over and grabbed the camera, the bobcat was gone. So,
yeah, they're so elusive, and like,
yeah.
they're like a blink of an eye. You just blink and they disappear,
So I have lots of trail cameras up on my property, and I see all of those animals passing through at night. And so I know they're around here, but a lot of, bobcats are pretty nocturnal, coyotes are pretty nocturnal. Obviously owls are. So a lot of those things that I aspire to photograph are mostly out at night, and you sort of get lucky during the day if you get a good look at them or, are able to photograph them.
That's a really good idea to leave your camera on the passenger seat. Like that's pretty ingenious.
Yeah, it has to be there because there's just so many, once you get into birding, especially birding, you're constantly driving around and you're always scanning. And yeah, if you pull over and roll the window down, you just need to be able to shoot right away. So, and when I'm in the backcountry ski world, when we're in avalanche terrain, we wear avalanche beacons, and there's a saying that you turn your beacon your beacon is on at the car, and you turn it off at the bar, meaning your avalanche beacon is on the entire time that you're out in the mountains. And I sort of adopt that mentality when I have a camera and when I'm walking around the woods. Like as soon as I leave my car, if I park somewhere, as I shut the door and lock the car, my camera is on, the lens cap is off, it's ready to go, because there's so many times where something really amazing, I either see it in the first 2 minutes when I've walked away from the car, or after 2 hours of walking through the woods, as I'm walking back to the car, those last couple of minutes, something will come out. And so my camera is on constantly, because you just never know when something's gonna pass by.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I did want to ask, because now you've been up here for 20 years, what's your favorite place to go skiing? Because there's so many different mountains around here. Just alpine skiing.
Yeah,
casual.
Yeah. Well, I've moved, as far as alpine skiing, I've moved around between all of the different resorts over the years. And they're all great for something. I'm skiing back at Bel Air this year, just because they've got a gondola there. They have really great snowmaking. They've got a great lodge. And so I'm sort of enjoying that terrain. But the last few years I've skied Hunter, because it's sort of the tallest and the biggest terrain. And it's a little more challenging when they have everything open. But I love Plattekill, which is out in Roxbury area. It's a husband and wife ski mountain. It's just open on the weekends. And there's something really, I grew up skiing across New York State at a lot of very small resorts, resorts that some of them don't even have chairlifts. They're just rope tows or T-bars. And so I have a lot of nostalgia for the way that ski resorts used to be. And Plattekill is really this like hidden gem of like a time capsule almost, but they do a really great job there. They have a great attitude. You can rent the entire mountain Monday through Thursday if you want. If you can get 80 people together, you can literally rent the mountain and have a private ski resort to yourself. So I don't know. I kind of like mixing it up just to, experience different views or different terrain or just a different ski lodge.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely get that hometown feel. I grew up around here, and I always skied at Catamount, which is, basically a hill. But over the years, I've grown to really love that place just because of like how much it is just a hometown place. And I went out to Pico in Vermont, and it was the same thing. I was like, oh, I love this mountain. Like this is perfect,
Yeah. Sometimes there's just something, it's like even a little hard to explain to people, just like you get a feeling from a mountain, just the way that, the staff, like the patrollers or the lifties, just the way that they talk to you, or see if there's something, sometimes you just have like a connection with a mountain.
For sure.
And as a kid going to Vermont, I certainly had that with some of the mountains that I skied at when I was younger.
Yeah, almost sounds like the Hickory Ski Center with that documentary that was showed with Catskill Queen. It almost like sounds like a similar feel from what 100%. You were doing.
Yeah. No, there's a whole world of ski resorts that are not part of like the Icon or Epic, pass holder system, especially here in New England and New York State. There's just so many small ski resorts that are still open and, making a go of it and have this like really great hometown feel. So it's fun to, as much as I like skiing bigger terrain, I really enjoy like going and sort of revisiting some of those small resorts.
So from my understanding, the reason why you started to ski the high peaks of the Catskills because you wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle of like the ski resorts. Is that true?
Yeah. Growing up as a ski racer, unless you're going on to sort of compete in the Olympics, your sort of competition years usually end when you finish college. And so that was the case with me. And post-college, I was living in New York City, so it was a little bit more of a hassle to get up to the mountains. And I just started to, I could only ski in the weekends. Resorts were super crowded, and I just really started to fall out of love with skiing. And that was around sort of the same time that I was starting to hike a lot of the Catskill Mountains. So getting out and hiking was sort of this way for me, like it is for a lot of people, just to sort of clear your head, have some solace, have some alone time in the mountains. And so over a couple of years while I was hiking the Catskill high peaks, I really love that feeling of being out there. And at the same time, I had started to do a little bit of backcountry skiing out west. And so as I was hiking here in the Catskills, I started to look at the terrain and just wonder, like, could I ski back down this trail? Or like those woods look somewhat open. Maybe if there's enough snow on there, I could like figure out a way to come back down. And as a ski racer, and my discipline that I really excelled at ski racing was slalom. And if you know anything about slalom racing and alpine skiing, you're literally hitting gates all the time. Your goal is to get as close to the gate and you're hitting it with your body the whole way down. And here in the Northeast, and especially here in the Catskills, if you're skiing in the woods and the Catskill high peaks, you're surrounded by trees and rocks and lots of hazards. And you kind of have to go in with this mentality that you're going to be hitting things on the way down, and you need to make tight, really quick turns, and you need to sort of figure out a way to navigate down. And all of those things started to it wasn't a deterrent. It didn't scare me. It's like sort of what drew me in, like this challenge of like, okay, like I know I have the skills to do it. Mentally, do I have it? I don't know. I just wanted to kind of go out and figure out if I could do it. And lucky for me, I have a younger brother that's 3 years younger than me, who also grew up ski racing. And so as I was talking out loud of this idea of like, maybe I want to try skiing the Catskills, my brother Doug said, well, I want to do it with you if you're going to do it. And so immediately I had a partner in crime that was willing to go out and figure it out with me.
Yeah. And that definitely
That's
helps,
so
having
cool.
someone like the like camaraderie of like doing something like
Oh
that.
yeah, I mean, you need the camaraderie. I mean, most people do. It's for safety reasons, especially
Right.
skiing out there. It's really great to have a ski partner. For someone to break trail, to switch off breaking trail, or if something goes wrong, or just partner to help help you make smart decisions out there, and someone to get excited about the prospect of going out and trying to ski another mountain when maybe you're like too tired or don't really feel like doing it. So and our abilities as far as like skiers or just fitness wise was really sort of simpatico. So it was great to have a partner like that that was really like, we didn't have to explain too much to one another.
Yeah. Was was it like hard to like scheduling, like with like, obviously you're kind of going from starting at different destinations to meet at a high peak, like was it hard to like schedule out, we got to be here at this exact time, or like was there any mishaps? And
Yeah, I mean that part was my brother lives 4 hours away in Western New York, and when we were both skiing the Catskills, even though I had a weekend house up here, I was down in New York City during the week, Monday through Friday job. So we're having to navigate, sort of living in two different areas than the Catskills. And then, with backcountry skiing, you're really beholden to the weather and the snow. And, it's not just enough that it snows 4 inches or 6 inches. I mean, there's so much rock and trees and fallen trees and just hazards. Like you really need consistent snowfall. And so, most winters, if we have a winter around here, you really don't get that sort of base building and enough snow until typically in like February and March. That's you kind of have to, because December and January, if you spend enough time around here, there's like all these like freeze thaw cycles, and like even though there might be a lot of snow up high, down low there might not be any snow. And so we were really often cramming in a lot of our skiing in February or March, when some of those big spring snowstorms would come through. And when they would produce something, then it was just like drop everything and just like clear the decks, and that's all you focus on for however a week or 2 or 3 that you have like all of that snow in the mountains. It's skiers, just alpine resort skiers can get fanatical about snow and like powder days, but like backcountry skiers in the Northeast are like another breed of like, fanatical, like really, because there's no one out there making snow. There's no snow guns that are like, it's not just enough to have it be cold. It could be, it's as a backcountry skier to have it be, 15 degrees for 3 weeks, but with no snow is like the most frustrating thing, because you're just, you're like, why can't it just snow? And so you really need that perfect combination of like cold, sustained cold, and a lot of snow. And then you go out there and you don't do anything else during that time period except go out and backcountry ski.
That's so awesome.
so was this time period like it was like 2012 to 2014? It took you 2 years?
Yeah, it was mostly, we skied something right at the end of 2012, but it was mostly 2013.
Okay.
And then 2014, we finished in March of 2014. And there was a giant snowstorm that came through that March. I took a week off of work. And I think in that final week, my brother and I, we skied about 14 peaks in 7 days.
Wow.
So we were skiing multiple peaks, I think, and we were even like skiing some peaks, getting in the car, driving to another peak, skiing that and like skiing out, in the dark with headlamps on. So we were really just like every day it was just going out and just trying to, finish this list before the snow melted and the season ended. Like we really, and I had a personal goal of trying to finish. My birthday is March 10th. I was turning 40 in 2014, and we skied our last Catskill high peak on my 40th birthday. And so that was just a personal, you set these like weird arbitrary, carrots out there. And so I was really motivated to sort of celebrate a big birthday with this sort of big accomplishment.
Yeah, that's really cool.
What a great way.
Yeah, that's a great gift for yourself too. Yeah.
Exactly. That was a great gift. I literally didn't need anything else, from anybody, it was just, that was really special.
So I understand from the 3500 club, they like rewarded you like afterwards. Like, didn't they like?
Yeah, well, they have. If you're familiar with the 3500 club, is a club that sort of promotes hiking of the Catskill high peaks.
Right.
And so once you hike all of the high peaks and do a couple other things, they give out at an awards dinner every year. They give out certificates with your sort of hiker number. So if you're the hiker number 3,850, you get a certificate with your name on it. When Doug and I finished skiing the 35 high peaks, we were acknowledged and awarded with ski certificates numbers 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Which wasn't something that they had before, but
really
some of the people that were involved in the club, had started to learn about our journey right towards the tail end, and they wanted to sort of acknowledge it. And when they gave us those certificates, it was a bit of a surprise, but like how cool to be 001. And I didn't know. I figured at some point someone would come along and get number 3 or 4, but it took a few years before I heard about anyone else even trying to ski the high peaks. I think it was almost 2014. Yeah, it was almost 7 or 8 years until I actually sort of heard murmurings of someone else going out there and purposely trying to ski them all. And that person was Julie McGuire, who I made the film Queen of the Catskills about.
Yeah.
So how did you? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, how did you like get introduced to Julie? You said you heard about her kind of through the grapevine.
When Doug and I were skiing, when we were skiing backcountry skiing the Catskills, there weren't really very many backcountry skiers in the area that I even knew of. And certainly when we were out there skiing the high peaks of the Catskills, during that time, we never saw another skier out there the entire time. Anytime we passed someone, it was a snowshoer or a winter hiker, and they were always shocked to see someone on skis out there. So I was like, yeah, but I had my ear to the ground. I was always interested in anybody else getting involved with backcountry skiing. And so I was always kind of checking, the hiker message boards and Facebook groups and Instagram. And eventually I would sort of see some other people that were maybe going to, maybe interested in backcountry skiing. And that's how I got connected with Julie, was through social media, where I saw her start to post that she was beginning to ski the high peaks. She had skied a handful of them a previous year to us meeting. And then I just reached out to her. I kind of wanted to meet her. I knew that she had already skied a handful, and I could tell that she was pretty determined to continue skiing them. So I just reached out to her, and we just had a sort of platonic ski date at Bel Air one day. Just went and rode the lifts and got to, hang out and chat. And before that day was over, I just sort of just sort of cold asked her, what would you think about me trying to make a documentary film about you? And I didn't tell her that I'd never made a film before in my entire life, but she was open to the idea. She said, sure. And we started filming later that summer, filming some hiking. And then the next winter, I went out with her and started following her on some of her ski adventures. So yeah, I, having done it myself, I knew what she was getting into was pretty difficult. So yeah.
How did it differ from being behind the camera versus like being in front of the camera? When you and your brother accomplished
Mm-hmm.
the high peaks with skiing, and then you're behind the camera, following someone else's journey. Like,
Yeah.
what was kind of like the difference of like feelings that were going on?
Well, I guess, when my brother and I were doing it, I was handling a lot of the like logistics and planning, like the route finding, what we were going to do, or just equipment that we were bringing. And, when Julie had started skiing her high peaks, part of what she was doing was she was skiing them alone. She didn't have a ski partner. And that was
Right.
kind of part of how she was choosing to approach it. And I knew that she also really relished like having that solitude out there. And so part of me as a filmmaker, I sort of made the decision that I wasn't gonna intrude on how she was approaching skiing the mountains or what she was choosing to do, the route she was taking or the equipment that she was bringing. Not that she was doing anything wrong per se, but could I have offered some alternative, suggestions? Probably, but I knew that I just wanted to be a fly on the wall and really just like step back. And so when we would go out and I was following her, I wasn't even doing any of the like route finding. I was just out there. I didn't know which way. Some of these peaks are trailless, so you kind of have to map, figure out which way you're going to go. And as a skier, you're really like focused on topography and avoiding cliffs and things like that some hikers might choose to go, straight up. So, yeah, I was just really trying to be hands off and let things unfold and let Julie figure out how to deal with problems. If like she had a issue with her binding or her like a ski boot or the skins that she puts on or something breaks, it wasn't my job to like jump in and like help her fix it, which with my brother, like as a ski partner, like that's what you would do. You'd be like, let's fix this right away.
Right.
But I had to kind of like step back and like let those things unfold and like let her figure them out and sort of struggle through it. And so, yeah, and that's, I don't know that it was difficult, but you have to like learn some restraint,
Right.
but it's also fun to just see how someone approaches something, or there are things that Julie skied off of or routes that she went up where I was like, I wouldn't have gone that way, but then she would do it and it's totally fine. I was like, like,
Yeah.
so you're also out there like learning at the same time, which is kind of fun. So I enjoyed that aspect as well.
How many peaks did you follow her on? Was it like a part of the journey, or like?
Yeah, I mean, so Julie and just like the little asterisk sort of between her journey and the journey that my brother and I did is my brother and I skied 35 mountains and Julie skied 33. And the reason for that discrepancy is during COVID, two of the Catskill high peaks have always been on private land. And those landowners for a long time have granted access to hikers to access the peaks. And for different reasons, during COVID, those landowners rescinded access to those high peaks. And so, so now there's only 33 peaks that are above 3,500 feet. And so, so there's just a slightly different list, but that's just an asterisk. And so to answer your question, I probably filmed with her in about 7 or 8 peaks. And that might have been over 4 outings because some of those days were multiple peaks. For instance, one of the times that we filmed, we did the entire Burroughs Range, which is Wittenberg, Cornell, and Slide Mountain. And so we left a car at one end and had a car at the other end, and made it a through trip from car to car. And so yeah, some of those were long days where we were out there filming, and she was skiing 3 peaks or 2 peaks, and then we did a couple individual peaks.
How rewarding is it to like showcase your film to like in front of a crowd? I'm sure like doing this whole journey and then like seeing an audience like react live to it and answering questions. I'm sure that's like, top
Yeah.
of the list of like great feelings,
It's pretty great. Yeah. This one of the first premieres that I was able to attend this fall for Queen of the Catskills was out west in Utah, in Park City. And I had just through the organizers, I knew that it was going to be a fairly well attended. I knew that the venue was on the larger side. But when I arrived, like it was a massive auditorium, 500 seats, and it was sold out. And it was like the first time that I was sitting in a theater full of strangers, and it was, 500 strangers. But yeah, it's a pretty amazing feeling, because you also just, when people and they were all, it was a sort of a skier based crowd. So they appreciated some of the subtle humor or things that were happening in the film. And so, yeah, when you hear people gasp or laugh or, tense up, we know when the person next to you doesn't know that you're the filmmaker, and you can feel them like react in their seat. Yeah, it's really fun. It's fun to be, again, just like a fly on the wall or someone invisible. Like, I was out in Utah. Nobody knows who I am. Someone from the Northeast, they don't know who I am until after the film and there's a Q&A. So, yeah, it's a pretty great feeling. And having screened this film and my other documentary film a handful of times out west in Utah and Wyoming and Colorado, I've learned that there's so many transplants from the Northeast or New York State or the Northeast that live out west and really are hungry to see what backcountry skiing is like back in the Northeast, because it's not the same as it is out west in Utah or Colorado or Wyoming. You're not skiing these beautiful powder laden bowls and this like perfect terrain. So yeah, it's fun when you show it to people that really appreciate how difficult it is to be a backcountry skier here in the Northeast. You have to really want to be a backcountry skier here in the Northeast. You're not going out there to get like the perfect turns. You're going out there probably for another reason.
Yeah. I feel like it's grown a lot in this area. Like I haven't really ever heard of people backcountry skiing the Catskills or even just like any of the mountains around here, even though like the ski mountains are kind of easier.
Yeah,
but it's cool to see it start coming here.
Yeah, at the resorts, a lot of the resorts around here now allow you to skin up and ski down before the resorts open, or some of them actually allow you to do it while they're open. And Hunter Mountain allows you to do it before the lifts open. And 10, 12 years ago, I would go in the mornings and I would either be the only person there doing it, or maybe if I saw one or two other people there, I would immediately go and find them and like talk to them, because it was just such a rarity. This year, at the beginning of January, I think we got a big snowstorm or right after Christmas. And at Hunter Mountain, I think I counted like close to 50 people in the morning that were out there, split boarders or backcountry skiers that were skiing up. And so, in 10 years to go from like seeing nobody to almost 50 people doing it in one morning, it's kind of exciting. And again, that's not, you go to Vermont, you go out west and there's exponentially more people doing it. Right. But yeah, it's especially during COVID that's taken a real uptick as far as people that are interested in sort of human powered skiing.
How is it like hiking up the mountain with, ski boots and the skis? Like that looks like such a tremendous feat in its own, just like hiking, like taking a couple steps, with all this
Yeah.
gear.
It's tricky, I mean, backcountry ski gear is lighter. Everything's lighter about it. The boots are lighter, the bindings, the skis, but yeah, you have these things on your feet and you have to understand how the skins work, how steep of terrain you can go up. And you have to learn how to make sometimes special like kick turns to like turn with skis when you're on a steeper surface. Certainly if things get icy or depending on the moisture of the snow, sometimes the snow can really start sticking to the bottoms of your skis, so you have to deal with that. Or the moisture in the snow makes your skins not really work, or it's icy, and so sometimes we actually attach ski crampons. They're like little crampons that kind of attach to your bindings and give you some extra bite when you're on a steeper surface. And then like some snowshoes, you also have risers on your ski bindings. So if you're going up something steeper, you can put the risers up and give your legs a little bit of relief from steeper terrain. So yeah, there's all these like little things that you have to learn, and it's not super complicated, but it can feel like a lot when you're just learning the equipment. And also if you're out there in the backcountry and you're not doing it at a resort, then you're also just dealing with all of the terrain out there and trying to figure out like where to go and what's how do I get up that cliff band or those rocks, or do I take my skis off and just put them on my backpack and climb up these cliffs, or is there a way around? So you're constantly making these calculations of, can I ski up this, or do I need to hike up it, or where do I ski back down? Because sometimes the way up is not the same way that you would want to ski back down. So yeah, you're really like making these mental maps. And sometimes my brother and I it's a little funny, we're always planning that stuff out as we're going into the woods. And sometimes we'll like put X's in the snow off to the side and be like, okay, here's when we ski back down, here's where we're going to take or put our skins back on or do this or this. And inevitably, like we never see these markings that we've like left in the snow because you just like ski past or you go a different route. And so, yeah, I don't know. We're just sort of silly like that. It's like one of those things we think we're being really smart and planning out, and then we have a whole other plan by the time we're skiing back down a mountain.
Right. Like, I mean, like it could be so unpredictable, with the routes and everything. And
yeah, it can be unpredictable, and things, the way that something looks as you're going up, once you get up there and you have a different viewpoint, a vantage point going down, suddenly you're like, oh, that doesn't make any sense, or this way is so much better. So yeah, you have to be flexible. I think with doing anything in the outdoors, you're constantly evaluating, taking information and figuring out, what the best way, most fun way, safest way is. Yeah. And those can differ. And, my brother and I have been out, we're brothers. And so we can argue a little bit more. And, sometimes we're out there, especially when we were skiing the Adirondacks, and those are long days, and we might have summited the peak that we intended to, and we're coming back down. And I'm always looking at a map and I'm saying, well, if we just spend another 2 hours, we're already halfway out here. We could just get this one more peak in and then come down. And he's always the voice of reason and saying, well, that wasn't our plan. And now you're changing the plan, and we're already pretty tired. And then, 2 hours, the sun's going to go down, and then it's going to get cold, and he's right. But I just get, I constantly like wanting to do a little bit more. And he's always reining me back in, and he's usually the voice of reason. So
that's good. Yeah, it's good to have that like that angel on your shoulder kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, because you can get into trouble, and and we have. So so it's good to have that voice of reason.
Well, how did you prepare for this? Like, was it like did you have to get the gear or prepare mentally, or was it like, all right, we're just gonna get up and go, and we're just going for it?
I mean, a little bit of going for it. I think for us, there were stages. First stage for us was hiking in the 35s. So just like getting to know the terrain, what are we getting ourselves into? So by the time that we were skiing the Catskills, It was really like our second round of doing the high peaks. And yeah, there was some figuring out process in there. But we knew these peaks weren't the Adirondacks, and so we felt like they were manageable within a day or within like your daylight hours in the winter. And you go out and you bring the gear that you think you need, and maybe Doug, my brother, brings some different gear, and you just talk about like what you'll do different next time, or what gear you'll change, or how you'll layer differently. And so over the course of skiing the 35 peaks here, we certainly like learned some things and made modifications. And by the time we worked our way up to starting the Adirondacks, we felt like we had a pretty good base of knowledge and like comfort level and like understanding of like the fitness that you probably would need, or how much water to bring, or just all the things, how many headlamps to bring. Do you bring a camping stove? Do we, like, what emergency supplies do you bring, as far as like if you need to spend a night out there? And honestly, we started skiing the Catskills in 2012, and we finished skiing the Adirondack high peaks in 2024. That's 12 years. And we constantly tinkered with what we put in our backpacks up until, almost the very last Adirondack high peak. To that point, that last year, that in 2024, when we were skiing the Adirondacks, we started carrying extra ski poles that were collapsible. They could collapse down to something like this big, because we were snapping so many ski poles out there. And when you're 5, 6, 8 miles out as a skier, and you need to be, a lot of the approaches in the Adirondacks is a couple miles of flat. And so you're constantly pushing. And if you don't have 2 ski poles, it's really exhausting. So we were carrying extra ski poles. We were carrying things to fix our bindings. We started carrying little tiny plastic snowshoes that could attach to the bottom of our ski boot using our boot crampons, because we also carry boot crampons. Because I had talked to a former Olympic athlete, grew up in the Adirondacks, won medals in 2 different Olympics ski racing, super accomplished. And he was backcountry skiing some of the Adirondack high peaks, broke a binding about 7 or 8 miles up in the mountains, and had to get back on one ski and one ski boot, punching through the snow the whole way back, which is physically exhausting.
Yeah.
In the Adirondacks, you have many feet of snow out there, and without something buoyant, I call it buoyant, but like without a ski under you or a snowshoe, you're just sinking through the snow. And after I heard that story, Doug and I started carrying these little snowshoes in case we had a ski failure out there where we couldn't use one of our skis. So yeah, it was really like 12 years of just constantly like refining and tinkering and figuring out like what we needed to carry to be safe. And, would Doug carry, for some of those emergency supplies, we split them up. So Doug was carrying half of them and I was carrying the other half.
What was your favorite snack to bring?
Oh man, the snacks. I don't know. I feel
I'm
like
sure it's changed over 12 years, but
yeah, I wish I had I don't know. I wish I had a better snack story. I think for Doug and I, I think we mostly carried pretty boring snacks, like, like trail mix and Gatorade and all that kind of stuff. But my brother is obsessed with Stewart's, the chain of gas stations.
Yes.
And he doesn't have Stewart's in Western New York. So
No.
up in the Adirondacks, there's Stewart's everywhere. And so Stewart's either before we have a big adventure, or definitely after. Stewart's milkshake, Stewart's pizza, Stewart's, just everything. So if we could bring a Stewart's like into the backcountry with us, like we'd be set.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I think everyone would backcountry ski then if there was a Stewart's.
I know that. Yeah. So maybe we won't do that. But Stewart's really fueled us like on the front and back end of a lot of our adventures.
That's cool.
Did you like prefer like out of the two like high what the Adirondack ranges and the Catskill ranges, like was one more enjoyable? I know it's like there's a vast variety of different mountains you have to do for each mountain range. So like
Mhm.
was like one more enjoyable than the other, or was it kind of like hard to say? I mean, like I know the Adirondacks took 10 years, so
Yeah. Yeah, enjoyable. I would have to say, I guess we're talking about enjoyment. There were a couple of peaks in the Adirondacks that were very enjoyable. Mount Marcy is the highest peak in New York State. It's over 5,000 feet. Um, it's above tree line. The day that Doug and I skied it was in April, and the conditions were so perfect up there. It was like 32 degrees, no wind, bluebird. We were the only ones up there, and it's sort of this giant cone up there. There's no trees. You kind of have a little bit of these natural bowls, and the conditions were so perfect and unusual that we actually skied that upper portion a couple times before we skied all the way back down.
that's cool.
And then the ski back down is like 6 or 7 miles of almost like continuous skiing. And to be able to just be on skis and be gliding and making turns for like, longer than any ski run that you would do at a typical resort is really special. So, and Mount Marcy is one of the classic peaks that a lot of skiers go up to. But yeah, I think as far as like enjoyment, as far as like just overall like satisfaction, getting the Adirondack peaks done was really gratifying. When Doug and I finished in 2024, it had been 28 years since someone had skied the 46 high peaks. And they'd only been skied once by a local named Ron Conowitz. And he completed that back in 1996. And it had been 28 years since any skier had, finished all 46 peaks until Doug and I completed it in 2024. So, which, in this March will be sort of the 30-year anniversary of Ron's first completion. But they're really hard peaks. They're really, long days, can be pretty dangerous. And a lot of them are not easy to ski. So, yeah, it took us 10 years, partially, because it's hard, partially because we didn't live up in the Adirondacks. And so it's a lot of driving, and there aren't a lot of skiers out there. And the skiers that are skiing in the backcountry kind of tend to keep mum about where they are, because, most of the backcountry skiers that are up there are really like, they're looking for the really good, like skiable terrain. Like they're not out there trying to ski the high peaks. And so they just kind of keep things mum because they've got their secret stashes and their secret places. So it was hard for us to get any kind of beta as far as like, oh, how are the conditions? It's like a skier, like, is there enough snow or is it all ice? And so we were really monitoring a lot of the like hiking forums and talking to hikers to try to figure out like weather-wise and snow-wise what was happening up there. But as skiers, we just need, we need slightly different conditions to, have it be something that we can go out and ski. And so we were really rolling the dice often over those 10 years, driving, 5 hours or 4 hours to go up there just to figure out if we'd even be able to ski something, on a particular trip.
So, well, I know your brother had a knee blowout during this excursion. Was that like the worst mishap that happened during your time doing the high peaks in the Adirondacks? Or
Yeah, well, his knee injury actually happened back at a resort, and it was during the time that we had started, but it didn't happen on one of the days that we were out in the backcountry. But it put a dent in what we were trying to do. And I guess to answer your question, eventually that injury did affect what we were doing. And on one of the days that we were out, we were about 8 miles out. We had already summited and skied one peak. We skied off the backside. We had just summited a second peak, and our original plan would have been to turn around, go back down, ski up over the first peak, and go back out. And as we got to the top of that second peak, my brother realized that his previously injured knee, which the injury was 2 years prior, that he couldn't stand on his knee. He couldn't put weight on his knee or use his ski. And we were 8 miles out there. We were sort of behind schedule as far as like where, we probably should have turned around already. We were just like, it was kind of late in the day. And we had no cell service out there. We had no means of two-way communication to tell anyone what was happening. And we had to make some decisions about how do we try to self-rescue and find a different way out, in a way that he could actually try to sort of walk/crawl out. And that turned into sort of a failed night of self-rescue. And we ended up having to call or activate an emergency beacon device and get rescued. We had attempted to cross a frozen lake, which would have been a mile or two of crossing this lake. And, my brother, he could still stand up. And the plan was if we could get to this lake and we were just on a flat surface, he could probably walk out and I would help him. When we got to that lake, the condition of the ice was just, it was just too tenuous. There was a lot of melting that had happened earlier in the week, and there was some open ice, and, it's midnight and we just can't really see, and I can't tell the condition of the ice. And I just, I thought there was a real chance that we could go through the ice, and, we had a mile or two to cross this lake. And so we figured it would be better to call rangers, activate the device, because at that point we were so many miles off of the course, the route that everyone knew that we should be on, that our emergency contacts back home would have contacted the rangers and told them to search somewhere completely different. And there's no way where we were previously, you can't get a snowmobile in there. It would have been a group of rangers that were hiking in 7 or 8 miles to look for us in an area that we weren't, in anymore. And so I figured, let's just activate the beacon, let them know where we are. So it's a lot easier for them to find us, and they're not going to spend, 8 rangers or volunteers looking for us where we weren't anymore. So it all worked out. We got out that night with the help of 2 rangers, and we learned a lesson.
Did you have to go back there, to redo the area, or
we did? Yeah, we weren't going to count it. Yeah, I guess sure. I had technically, I had more or less skied both peaks, but we wanted to. Yeah, it wouldn't have sat right with us. We were really sort of our ethos for the Catskills and the Adirondacks was really kind of skiing car to summit to car. And that didn't mean 100% of the time we had to have skis attached to our feet. I mean, in both mountain ranges, there's areas where you've got to climb up a cliff band or get over some ice or some hazard. And so, yeah, you're going to pop your skis off and do it. But really, we, 99.5% of the time, we want to be, we want to leave the car, be skiing all the way up, and then ski back to the car. And certainly that night, when my brother's injury came back up, we were far from, fully skiing back out. So we went back, and just before we finished our last Adirondack high peak, we redid those two peaks, and they're just not great peaks to begin with. I don't think they're anyone's favorite peaks to hike, and certainly we had a bad taste in our mouth from what had happened to us the first time. So, and the second time we went back to redo them, the conditions were not really great. Conditions were actually pretty terrible and like somewhat conducive to an injury just because there was it was either icy or very rocky and not a lot of natural snow to deal with. And so, yeah, it made us nervous to go back out and do it. But we weren't going to consider it done until we went back out and redid those 2 peaks.
Right.
Yeah.
Cal, you have anything?
I don't
Oh, okay.
actually.
Well, I guess I can keep going. I don't want to hog off the whole thing. Like for editing your movies,
Mhm.
are you the editor, like the sole editor, like, or like do you give it to somebody else and like give notes, or like how does that work?
Yeah, I do everything,
Yeah.
which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but yeah, I sort of, as I was saying before, I sort of taught myself photography and like how to use the camera, filmmaking wise, to a degree that I could make these films. Um, and yes, I do all of the editing and sort of post production, which is something I've had to learn too. I had a former career as a graphic designer for 20 years. So, using a computer, using a lot of these programs isn't totally foreign to me, but there's still a lot that I don't know. Yeah, it's been a whole, the camera and filming is like one learning curve over here. And then the editing and post production and color correction and all of that is something else, and another learning curve over there. And so, yeah, it's a lot of work. But these are somewhat labors of love. I think a lot of people aren't making documentary films to get rich. And I think with both the 10 years that Doug and I were skiing the Adirondacks and the 4 years that I followed Julie around, there's just things I felt. It's a world that I know pretty well, and just I don't know. I just really enjoy like figuring out how to tell the story, and even if that process of like technically trying to make a movie or edit it down can be really difficult. I still enjoy going through that process, and as I've started to make more films, I've like learned to reach out to like a small network of people to get feedback on, or to give me notes on edits. And I've certainly taken those into consideration. And especially with Julie's film, I had gotten notes from a bunch of strangers that I had showed an early cut to, and they all were adamant that I needed to take about 6 or 7 minutes out of the film and put some other things back into the film. And they were right. And I ended up like really reworking like an entire new version of the film, which is close to what I ended up releasing. And it was great feedback. And just, when you're editing a film and it's something that's really personal, you can get really like sort of sucked into like this one, viewpoint, or you're so familiar with it. There's things that you inherently just understand.
Mhm.
And with Queen of the Catskills, the screening that you guys attended the other night was like the 51st or 52nd screening that I've done in the last few months. And I haven't been at every one, but I've been at enough to like understand the little things that people don't quite understand, things that I could have improved upon, or made more clear, or things that I could have taken out. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think as, an editor or a filmmaker, like it's hard to land at that like perfect version of the movie. You have to get it to a point where you like feel really good about it. But after you do all these screenings, you realize there's so many ways to make this and to like slice and dice it. And that's also what's kind of fun about it too.
Yeah, I think it's George Lucas has said a film's never finished; it's just abandoned. Like so, like
Yeah.
you could like spend your whole time just keep editing or like finiting these like little scenes or sections. And it'll never be perfect. I feel like to the like filmmaker's eye.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, I've watched both of the films that I've made. I mean, at this point, I've watched them hundreds of times, just editing and editing and editing. Yeah, and you just have to be comfortable with like what you have to be okay with like some of the warts and deficiencies that it might have when you release it into the world. But I've learned to be okay with that. I think also just as someone that came into filmmaking sort of very, late in life, it's not my vocation. And there's a lot that I don't understand about it, but I'm okay with that. And so I give myself a little grace when I'm working on these films, and they're not going to be perfect. But I also really believe in the stories behind them, and that's really, to me, and I think with most films, it's like, is the story really strong, and does it resonate with people, and like if there's some technical aspects of the film that could have been better. I mean, I can always improve on that later, but yeah, the story
Right.
is really, that's like the most important aspect.
So, have you done like other like hikes in the Catskills? Like I saw something that you done Devil's Path in one day.
Mm-hmm.
What were the conditions like for that? Because I've done that personally. It was like a couple of years ago, and it was a
Mm-hmm.
June day, and it like ended up being like a really weird day. It was like windy, but it was like a perfect day for it because it felt like fall out there.
Yeah.
I could see it being pretty rough, like if you're going in the summer and
I
or
never did it in the summer. Yeah. I've done it twice in single day pushes, and both times were like early fall. And
mm,
so, what I've aimed for both times, and for those of you not familiar with the Devil's Path in the Catskills, it's roughly 26 miles, and it goes over about six of the high peaks. And I think you've got about 9,000 feet of 8 or 9,000 feet of elevation gain. And so you're climbing over the course of those mountains, 8 or 9,000 feet, and you're also descending. So it's a lot of up and down. And for me, my ideal conditions is like early to mid fall, like a cool day. No rain, obviously, and like just before like the leaves start to fall, because you don't want leaves or wet leaves, because there's so much rock and you're constantly climbing up and climbing down, so just to avoid slipping. um, and if it's in the 40s when you start, and it climbs to the low 50s or low 60s, to me that's ideal for trying to do it in a single day. And the second time that I did it was a little bit more of a bit of a trail run. You're sort of fast climbing the ascents, trying to trail run the ridges or down. So yeah, I don't think it's something that I would want to do in like the high peak summer, 90 degrees and humid. But it's hard. And the first time that I did it, I met some guys that were backpacking it. They were planning to do it over 2 nights, and I saw them very early at the beginning of the trail. And I did the whole trail in a day. I stayed at a friend's house that lives at the end of the trail. The next day, he drove me back to my car, and I was driving on Route 214, which kind of intersects with like the halfway point of the Devil's Path. And I saw the two guys that I had met the morning prior, the backpackers, and they were hitchhiking into Hunter or Tannersville. They had completely run out of food. They told me that they only brought Jolly Ranchers. They thought like sugary Jolly Ranchers would be enough to sustain them for 26 miles and
oh god,
18,000 feet of climbing and
yeah, and like
descending
staying overnight too.
and staying overnight.
That's
And
crazy.
they were so spent, and they were literally had their thumbs out. And I recognized them, and I pulled over and gave them a ride back to their car. And one guy was bailing, one guy wanted to continue on and get more food. But yeah, I think a lot of people just underestimate what, they were up from New Jersey. I think they weren't, super familiar with the Catskills. And I think people get lulled into this idea that the Catskills aren't that big, so they're not
Mm,
that challenging. And we're just going to go out and do this 20-mile-ish hike. And yeah, and they learned a lot. And the one guy had already failed, he told me, a trip prior. So this was his second attempt and was failing again. So I think, the Catskills can be sneaky like that. And I think that's, just these trails here in the Northeast or in the Catskills, when they're ascending or descending, they're often going straight up or straight down. If you're hiking out west, trails are often, they're gentle, or they're doing these big switchbacks, and the gradient is not that, it's a little bit easier, on your body. And here in the Catskills, you've just got rocks, and the trails just go, vertical. So it catches a lot of people off guard.
So I just Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say that the weather can be like so inconsistent in the Catskills too. Like, I mean, we live in Catskill, but even just going up to some of the hikes in the morning, be so different at the bottom to the top. And then like,
100%.
just even the afternoon to the morning, it's like you can do a hike 8 times and it's never the same.
It's never the same. Used to go out hiking with friends, just like a little day hike, not even to the summit. And they would show up and just not have any extra layers, not have any gloves. And I just started carrying a backpack full of extra things for people that were not, familiar with hiking, because they wouldn't want to bring all this stuff. And then suddenly we get partway up and like it starts raining, or the wind comes in, and now everyone's cold and they don't have anything. And I'm just passing things out, gloves and mittens, and they're so thankful. But yeah, to your point, things can really change quickly from the trailhead to the summit.
Well, you're a nice friend for doing that.
Yeah, I've learned. Well, I'd rather do that than deal with, getting them, rescued because they're wearing shorts and flip-flops. And yeah.
So I just have a few more questions. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but is there any like spiritual moments that happen while being out in the wilderness that just kind of come back to you, or like, you had anything like that, just being out in the mountains or anything?
Maybe it's spiritual. I don't know. When Doug and I summited our very final Adirondack high peak, my brother, halfway through the 10-year journey, my brother had said to me that, he didn't care what order of peaks we did along the way, but the last peak he wanted to be Mount Colden, and which is sort of central in the Adirondacks. And so if you get up there and the weather's right and you're not socked in the clouds, you kind of you're sort of right in the center of the Adirondacks. So you have all of these peaks that are surrounding you. So it's really picturesque and kind of majestic. And the day that we skied our final summit in March, just as we were summiting, the clouds somewhat broke. It had been really kind of almost like foggy and misty down below. And so we were sort of breaking through the clouds, and we had sort of this, I don't know if it was a fog bow or a rainbow, but we really had this like magical kind of rainbow appear for about 10 or 15 minutes. And, to be at the end of a 10-year journey and to be sort of climbing this last peak that you've been like holding off on, and then to have this, it doesn't even sound real, but, to have something like that happen it was just, for a picture, it was really nice, but there was just something, I don't know. I was really sort of like emotionally moved by it for lots of different reasons. So was it a spiritual moment? I don't know, but it really caught me off guard. And I probably, even though we were sort of in the midst of celebrating this 10-year journey together, there was about 5 minutes where I just let my brother go to the very summit on his own, and just took like 5 minutes just to like sort of, be present and by myself there on that summit. Part of it was just reflecting on the journey too that we had gone through, and a lot of the things that we had gone through. So that might be as close to a sort of a spiritual moment for me, but it was pretty fitting.
Yeah, that's cool. It's like the gold at the end of the rainbow kind of thing, you know. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that's
No, it
really
felt pretty special.
yeah. So I just wanted to ask you. These are a couple quick questions. Do you have any pets? And if so, what? Well, how do you take care of them while you're on awesome adventure?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have had up until this past June, I've always had animals in my life, and I've had two dogs in my life, or most recently a dog. She passed away in June, so the first time in my entire adult life that I do not have any pets to sort of care for, and so this winter, and I love having animals around. They're a great addition to my life. But these last few months, and especially this winter that we're in right now, is really the first time where I don't have to come home and take care of a pet or walk a dog. And it's just sort of unlocked this new thing for me where if there's a snowstorm in Vermont or up in the Adirondacks, I can literally just throw gear in the car and drive away and be
Right.
somewhere for 4 or 5 days. So, yeah, it's a whole new world for me, but I'm sort of leaning into that spontaneity of just being able to go off and adventure. And if I don't want to come home that night and I want to go birding somewhere the next day or go skiing or trail running, I can do that. So that's all to say there are lots of adventures sort of churning up in my head now. And I do sometimes keep a sleeping bag and clothes in my car just if the feeling strikes and I don't want to come back to the Catskills. So yeah, TBD on what that all means. But yeah. But I will say, sort of on the pet front, I did backcountry ski with my friend and his dog for the first time. And this was a couple weeks ago. And to be able to ski off of a mountain with a dog running at your side while you're skiing down the entire mountain was a really fun thing. So I highly recommend that if anyone gets the chance to ski with a dog. That was really fun.
Yeah, that is cool. Do you do like ice climbing or anything along those lines, like on top of hiking or skiing? Like, have you ever tried
Yeah,
diving
yeah,
into
I'm
those
not a
depths?
climber. I have ice climbed before here in the Black Clove area of the Catskills. Um, and, with some of the backcountry skiing that we do, we call it ski mountaineering. And so, especially in the Adirondacks, there are natural landslide areas, and some of those areas can get icy at times. If the snow gets blown off and just the conditions change. And so, part of our kit that we carry when we're in the Adirondacks, we have boot crampons. We have ski crampons, but we also have boot crampons that go on the bottom of our ski boots. So they're ice climbing crampons. We carry at least one ice axe. If you're traditional ice climbing, you've got two ice axes and ropes and things like that. But for ski mountaineering, you would be carrying often one ice axe. So if you are not able to ski up something, if you're actually sort of booting up, as we say, if you've got crampons on your feet, sometimes you have that ice axe for extra stability to help you, get up a steep, icy pitch. And then Doug and I would, avalanche danger is present in the Adirondacks, and people have been buried, and there also have been avalanche fatalities, both skiing and ice climbing in the Adirondacks. So depending on where we are, if we're going to be in avalanche terrain, we have our avalanche beacon, an avalanche shovel in case you need to dig someone out, and an avalanche probe, which is it's almost like an 8-foot long tent pole that if someone is fully buried and you're using your beacon to locate them, it's too exhausting. You can't just dig a hole to see if that person is down there. The first step is to use that probe to see if you can actually strike and find where that person is buried, so you know where to start digging. So yeah, so we sort of carry like a mix of ski mountaineering gear, which crosses over with ice climbing a little bit, and then we have our avalanche safety gear. Yeah, there's some things in the Adirondacks ski wise that have like a mandatory, a long ski down, but then you have like a mandatory rappel or ice climb down, which I aspire to do one day, if I can get the right people to take me out and help me with the ropes and the ice climbing aspect. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I just have a couple quick fire questions.
Yeah, let's
So
go.
what's your favorite animal?
Oh man. I don't, I'm going to go with owls right now. I've just been
Okay.
obsessed with owls for a couple years.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like owls. Yeah. So I feel like this question like is not asked to adults enough. What is your favorite dinosaur?
Oh, yeah. Well, my dad, I'm not going to be able to tell you the name of the dinosaur. Are you guys familiar with the Loch Ness Monster?
Yes.
So in Lake Champlain, between New York and Vermont, we have the Lake Champlain Monster, or people know him as Champ.
Yes, I knew it.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, my dad, who was a scuba diver and shipwreck explorer, spent a good part of the 1980s looking for Champ in Lake Champlain.
Wow.
So
That's really cool. Wow.
So whatever dinosaur Champ is, a plesiosaurus.
I think you're right. I think it is.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the plesiosaurus.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Wow.
Yeah.
It's like a whole long list of adventurers in your family. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, like, what's the next step? Like, what's the next adventure? What's the next thing on the horizon? If you could disclose any details about it.
I've got a few like loose ends to tie up. So Doug and I, so when we finished the Adirondacks, we were the second people to have ever skied the 46ers. We also became Adirondack 46ers because we technically summited all the peaks. But when I was telling you earlier about the day that we skied Mount Marcy, that was in April. And so technically it was the one peak that we did not ski during the winter months. And so in the Catskills or the Adirondacks, the winter season is from December, 21st to like March 21st. And so if you want to become a Catskill winter 35er or an Adirondack winter 46er, you have to do all of your peaks in those months. Mm-hmm. So Mount Marcy is the one peak that we have not done in the winter. So I've gone back twice to try to ski it, and both times had to turn around a couple hundred feet from the summit because the conditions were white out and just the winds, and there was no visibility, and it was just too dangerous. And so Doug and I are planning to go back again this year to try to ski it before March 21st and become winter 46ers. I'd also, I've been skiing the highest peaks in every state in New England and New York. So Mount Marcy, Mount Mansfield in Vermont, Mount Washington in New Hampshire, Greylock in Massachusetts. But the one state I haven't been to is Katahdin in Maine. And so that is a long, epic ski to get into Katahdin during the winter because they closed the park roads down in the winter months. And so you've got a really long ski in, and then you have to potentially deal with some avalanche terrain and some weather. So at some point I hope to get up and ski Katahdin and, kind of check that off my list. So just, weird things like that. And then there's lots of skiable terrain in the Adirondacks. It still is difficult to get into. And it's not necessarily going all the way up to the summit of a peak, but there's just these kind of like areas that I want to explore with some folks and get in there and actually do some fun exploratory skiing, these little ski missions. So yeah, I think, backcountry skiers, we always have like these lists that we sometimes carry around with for years, and you just never know if you're going to find the right ski partner or the weather or the time, in your life that you can dedicate to going somewhere for a couple of days and exploring and seeing if it pans out. So yeah, I'm always carrying lists around of potential things to do like that.
That's cool. So do you want to shout out like any social medias, anything you want to announce like coming up?
Yeah. Let's see, where do we start? Well, I'll just recap the two movies I've made. So The Variable is the film that came out last year about the 10 years that my brother and I skied the Adirondack Mountains, variablemovie.com. And the latest film, Queen of the Catskills. You can find more information at queenofthecatskillsmovie.com. And Queen of the Catskills has been screening around the country this fall and winter. Both films are playing together at Rosendale Theater, which is here kind of in the Hudson Valley Catskills, next Thursday night. It's the only time that I've ever screened both films together. Maybe will be the only time. And I was just told today by the theater director that tickets are almost sold out. So, but looking forward to that. And my brother will be in attendance as well as Julie McGuire. So all skiers from both films will be in attendance for the Q&A for that night. So sort of looking forward to that.
Oh, that's awesome. Well,
and I guess the last thing I'll just mention, myself, I'm on Instagram at Catskill Tracks. So you can sort of follow along either. If you like skiing or you like wildlife, I've got lots of that on that account. If you don't like either of those things, don't follow me. Don't come and check it out. But yeah.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for coming on. This was quite a treat for all of us. So yeah, this was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great chatting with you guys. And I love talking about the mountains. So great to be here.
Awesome.